Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's May the 30th, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined this morning by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, and Stephen Wagner, as we discuss the news of the day. And guys, we're past Memorial Day. Everybody's well rested, but as it pertains to the Miami Hurricanes, that means it's time for two things. It's time for postseason baseball, and it is time for recruiting season to heat up in a big-time way, with official visitors getting ready to visit campus beginning this weekend and each successive weekend as we go through the month of June. You'll have your Legends Camp at the end of the month. And by the end of this next 3-4 week cycle, I think that your 2024 recruiting class will start taking shape. So let's start off with baseball, since they obviously are hosting a regional this weekend at Alex Rodriguez Park, Mark Light Field. Matt, you were out there for the unveiling of the opponents yesterday for discussion about the regional. Give us your thoughts on what Miami's facing this coming weekend, what you think their prospects are, and what their mindset is right now, coming off a disappointing loss to Clemson in the ACC Tournament Championship game that would have pretty much guaranteed them a super regional if they were able to advance past this weekend. Now, we'll wait and see what happens. But your thoughts just on the whole baseball picture?
Yeah, I've gone to these, it's a half-hour TV show where they announce the seeds. I've gone to these for the last, 20 years. Every year that they've made the postseason, I've gone to these locker room gatherings. And this year's honestly was extremely disappointing. They had no food. There was no food. Normally there's pizza, at least for the media. So extremely, nothing. No salad, no pizza, extremely disappointing. I was the first one there. I was very excited. I was very hungry. First reporter there. I was on the case, doing my job. Walk in, and the media SID immediately spotted me, and he was extremely excited to see me because he said, "Get out." Apparently, the media wasn't allowed to come in until exactly 11:45 a.m. God forbid they got there 10 minutes early. So I waited outside like a nice reporter does, and finally went in. There was no food. Everybody was huddled in front of the TV, looking at their phones. If I'm Gino DiMaria, I take away every player's phones on a day like this, because the media is there. I'm trying to take a nice photo of the team to run on the website with our story, and they're all just looking down at their phones, totally disinterested. The show starts, and they announce the top 8 seeds, and when Stanford was announced as number 8, they're all like, no. Then they're announced as number 9, and they're like semi-excited, and then they find out Texas is in their bracket, and they're like, oh, and there's silence. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm not built to go to these events. I don't know. If they had food, I'd probably be like, on here this morning. If they had food for me, I'd be like, oh my God, it was
just too big of a freeloader. Maybe you could have just walked over across the street to Titanic and gotten yourself a sandwich and been in good shape.
Listen,
you have to go pony up for free pizza at the baseball stadium.
Every good reporter will tell you that they're in it for the food, okay? We're certainly not in it for making the money. Anyway, so being the number 9 seed, at the end of the tournament, it's like Gary going to Hooters and finding out that they replaced it with a Chick-fil-A. It just doesn't. It's still good, but it's not great. There's no bling and blang, fling and flam. I don't know, whatever words you use from the 1920s, flim and flam, I guess. So it wasn't great. It wasn't. I'm not going to lie and sit here and say the team was excited. They were not excited. If anything, they were as disappointed as I was when there was no food. They were still hoping to be a number 8 seed. And, Gino DiMaria afterwards was bemoaning how he almost made it sound like he intentionally threw the final game against Clemson to save Andrew Walters' arm and to save the pitching staff. And they could have won the game if they'd used all their players. Not like Clemson apparently didn't save anybody. I don't know Clemson's team, but he makes it sound like Clemson just did everything like they don't care about their players. But at Miami, we're not putting our players at risk. We didn't use our pitching staff. We weren't going to use Andrew Walters no matter what. And that's why we lost. And if we had won, we would have been a national 8 seed, he says. That's what he says, basically. And then
I think
we talk to Andrew Walters.
For the regional,
by the way, this is the worst thing I heard. Yeah, never ask me anything because all fans are going to say is I complain, which I do. And then Andrew Walters gets up in front of us, and someone says to him, how did you feel pitching 3 days in a row? He says, my arm was very fatigued. Like, that's not what we want to hear. Like, I want to sit here and tell you how great everything is. The team is so excited, and they won 13 out of 16 games, so they're on a roll. The truth is the team's playing great baseball. The team has amazing wherewithal to come back in any situation.
There you go. Keep throwing the positives in there.
The team these are the positives. I always do the negatives first. All anyone remembers is the last thing you say. And the hitting and the fielding is national championship team level. The pitching's the concern, and you get Carson Lagone back, so maybe that'll make a big difference. I don't know, but I've watched games of theirs. I'm not going to say I covered all their games, but I've watched their games. And their starting pitching is not championship level pitching. It's just not. They have a really good closer, a pretty good setup man. Their starting pitching hasn't been great to me all year. I don't think they have a single starting pitcher with an ERA under 4.4. That's not good. So if somehow the starting pitching comes alive now, then they'll be at Omaha and they'll probably have a chance to win the national title. If their starting pitching fails, and guess what? Texas is a really good hitting team. And Maine hits a lot of home runs and hits pretty well too. They got a couple of real studs on that team that can hit the ball. It's a totally different level. But that Texas team can hit. And that Texas team is sort of similar to Miami. They have one really good pitcher, but not great pitching. And their relief pitching's a mess. So there are holes in every team Miami's going to play at regionals. I think Miami is the best overall team in the region. And I think Miami will advance from the regional unless they have some sort of mental breakdown, which would be disappointing because last year they were a higher seed than this year and they didn't get out of regionals.
All right, so they got 38-20 Texas in this regional, along with 40-22 Louisiana and 32-19 Maine. They'll begin with a opening game against Maine on Friday night. Ultimately, figure to have to run into Texas. So, Matt, based on what you're saying, you don't think that this Texas team is the traditional Texas powerhouse of the old days when it was Ron Frazier versus Rod Dayda, or what was the name of that Texas coach? It wasn't Dayda, he was UFC. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the Texas coach, but if Miami and Texas were two of the elite teams in college baseball every single year, this Texas team bats .297 as a team. They've hit 85 homers this season. They have 6 starters that bat over 300, Matt. So they're a decent hitting team, but you feel comfortable in proclaiming that, Miami should be the better outfit when those two teams ultimately collide.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it comes down to pitching and defense. And Texas has two pretty good starting pitchers. But once you get past those two guys, the bullpen's not good. I think they've used, 6 different guys as closers or in save situations, whatever. Actually, there are 9 different players. I'm just looking at the item. There are 9 different players with saves on the team. I was just going off my memory. And after those first 2 starting pitchers, they don't have another starting pitcher that's any good statistically. They started using this guy now who has an 8.22 ERA. It's their number 3 guy. The prior guy had a 5.7 ERA, 5.68 ERA. I mean, Miami should be fine because as long as Miami beats Maine, even if you lose to Texas and you win your next game against Louisiana, now you're playing Texas twice more. Like Texas does not have the pitching to survive that against Miami's lineup, period. Miami has, as not great as Miami's pitching is overall to me, they have a better starting pitching depth and staff than Texas. And if you're going to take them to the 4th and 5th game of this series, Miami will light up the scoreboard, in my opinion. I'm not concerned about it. The concern will be if Miami somehow loses its mind and loses to Maine or to the Raging Cajuns, because now Texas is safe and it's one of the 2 good pitchers for Miami for sure. In that scenario, either in game 2 or game 3, depending on the situation of if Miami loses to Maine or the Raging Cajuns, then you got a problem. But as long as Miami takes care of Maine and the Raging Cajuns, you got no problem, in my opinion. So I think the path to success is just don't lose to the number 3 and the number 4 teams in the bracket, and you'll be fine because Texas has no depth in their starting pitching, and they have no great bullpen options. And Miami has a great lineup.
All right, so those games will be this weekend at the stadium. If you're a season ticket holder, the university is holding your seats for you. So make sure you get in touch with them and lock in your spot for this weekend. And there'll be a public sale for tickets. I'm sure there's going to be big crowds. So I wouldn't, if you want to go out to the games this weekend, I would not delay. I would go ahead and get your tickets. The general public sale begins at 9 a.m. this morning. Okay, so season ticket holders should have by now probably secured their seats, but if you haven't, I would get on the horn to the ticket office and make sure you do that because they are opening sales to the general public at 9 a.m. this morning. All right, Stephen, you've been sitting there patiently, clearly mesmerized by the typical Matt Shodell show. And I know it's not because you don't care about baseball, because I remember when you interviewed for your job, you even mentioned that you love baseball and would love to go to some Miami baseball games from time to time and things like that. If I'm remembering correctly, I hope I am. I mean, I drank a little bit this weekend. No argument. I might have fried some brain cells, but I think I remember that coming up in your job interview. So, of course, you might on a typical weekend go out to Mark Light and watch some regional baseball this weekend, except for one thing. It's football visit kickoff weekend, and we will have several visitors in Coral Gables this weekend, which means it'll be all hands on deck and we'll be very busy. But Stephen, this is the start of what should be a big month for Mario Cristobal for this Miami Hurricanes program. Listen, I mean, recruiting has gotten off to a decent start. They've gotten several commitments, obviously, but these are not what I would call home run commitments to this point. I mean, you've got a 4-star in Chance Robinson. And I happened to be at a barbecue this weekend with the athletic director of St. Thomas, who happens to be a former Hurricane. And I said, hey, Twan, Chance Robinson, the real deal? And he confirmed that he thinks Chance Robinson is going to be an excellent football player at the University of Miami. I tried to get him to compare him to like Leonard Hankerson or Philip Dorsett, and that didn't go real well. He kind of said, Chance is a unique guy, but we had a nice talk about Miami recruiting at St. Thomas. He says that the recruiting at St. Thomas under Mario Cristobal in the first year and few months is massively better than anything that's been going on over there in the last decade, and that Miami's in a real good place recruiting St. Thomas. However, getting back to what I was saying, Stephen, so there's, I guess, one 4-star on the commitment list right now, and this is going to be a big month to improve on that and rise up the recruiting rankings. I did a segment a couple days ago with On3 Roundtable where we talked a little bit about that. And I went out on a limb and I said that I think that they will have a great chance to land 2 5-star defensive linemen in this recruiting class. They're in the game for most of them. And that they will get anywhere from 7 to 10 commitments in the month of June. Am I like totally out of my mind, like a lot of people think I am? Or do you think I'm headed in the right direction with those comments?
Okay, well, first off, I think not talking for 14 minutes has to be like a new record for me or something like that. Second off, I was really having to chew through my tongue not to comment on this Miami baseball regional, because I did watch the selection show and I did have about 1.5 billion takes that ran through my mind and scenarios for how this thing could work out. My advice, don't sleep on the Raging Cajuns, seriously. But anyway, going to recruiting, yeah, I do think that June is going to be a really, really big month for Miami. I think this is going to be the month where we really start seeing them push for a lot of kids to commit, because what so many of these programs do, and it's not just Miami, it's every program in the country, is they get these kids on campus for these official visits. They get these warm, fuzzy feelings. You spend a weekend hearing about how great you are and how much fun you're going to have here and how you're going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. And they want to ride that wave of recruiting momentum that they're able to build during that weekend and say, hey man, what's it going to take to get you in a Miami uniform? What do we need to do to get you to commit now? I've talked to plenty of recruits. A handful here and there have said, yeah, Miami is trying to get me to commit, or they're trying to get me to schedule an OV. But for the most part, we've seen a lot of patience from Miami staff. We've seen Miami tell, elite prospects, hey, we're not going to pressure you. When the time is right, the time is right. And, meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, I can't imagine doing something like that or being confident enough in my recruiting pitch and in my recruiting strategy to be willing to be patient with a high-level 4-star recruit or a 5-star recruit or anything like this. But I think June is going to be the month when Miami finally says, all right, the time is now for us to make our move. Because the way I see it, we were just talking baseball, so I'll go ahead and make a baseball analogy. June is the cleanup month. May,
very good.
The spring and May got your runners on base, and June is the month for your cleanup. In May or March, April, and May, we saw Miami make serious moves with a lot of 5-star recruits. I'm talking Dylan Stewart, the #1 overall player in the country in the On3 ranking. I'm talking about Justin Scott, who has skyrocketed up for Miami. And then I'm talking about David Stone and Kamarian Franklin and all of these guys who are going to be getting on campus for these official visits. Aiden Breland is another guy who's up there too. Same for Jericho Johnson and Jaden Jackson. Really all of these really high level 4 and 5-star talents on the defensive line, especially as we see Miami really hammer that front seven and especially the defensive line in this year's recruiting class. Miami was able to really build up a lot of momentum during March, April, and May. And now they've set up these dominoes to be knocked over in the month of June. And that's definitely what Miami's going to want to do. I've got a feeling that Mario's got something up his sleeve, and I've got a feeling that he's probably going to be bringing out the loafers sometime soon.
Can they land 2 of those defensive linemen like I predicted?
100%. Yes, absolutely. They 100% can get 2 of those defensive linemen. Right now, I think Justin Scott is probably the one that we're all thinking, we feel pretty good about, the predictions that we've made and kind of, the coverage that On3 has had or that CaneSport and On3 have had about his recruitment. David Stone, still think they've got a little bit of work to do there, but I think they've done a really good job with him too. And then Dylan Stewart and Colin Simmons, 2 guys who, to be honest, going into the spring, I kind of thought to myself, Dylan Stewart and Colin Simmons, like seriously, Miami has a chance to get those guys. Are we being serious? But they get to campus and all of a sudden, they're scheduling return visits, and it really turns into a holy cow. Miami's a legitimate player in this, and they have Jason Taylor to thank for that. This is exactly why Mario Cristobal brought Jason Taylor or promoted Jason Taylor to a full-time position coach to begin with, to get you in the room with a Dylan Stewart, with a Colin Simmons, just to be able to say, or just to get these guys to be able to say, yeah, I'll take an official visit. I'll come down. I'll check you guys out. I'm willing to sit down and I'm willing to have the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and they're just doing a spectacular job getting all these guys engaged. I mean, these guys that are being recruited by Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. These are guys that can go anywhere they want in the country, and Miami's right there in the mix. Now, they're not going to get all of them. Let's not get insane here, but I think if they can land 2 of these guys, that's a massive, massive win for Cristobal and Jason Taylor and their defense in general. And then they go on from there. And the other question I was asked, Stephen, is can Miami have a top 10 recruiting class this year? And I made the prediction there again that they would have a top 10 recruiting class and that they would exit the month of June in the top 10. Your thoughts on that?
I could definitely see that happening. Right now, kind of about, and I made this post on the board the other day. But I said that I felt like Miami, it kind of feels right now like they're probably going to land somewhere in the 10 to 12 range. Now, could we bump up from that and go up to 6 like they did last year, or 7, 8, or 9, or heck, even higher than that? Absolutely, especially the way that they're going.
Now.
Especially the way that they're going after these 5 stars in the positions that they're putting themselves in. I mean, if you land the number 1 overall player in the country, which, kind of a couple of months ago, we, would have been saying, well, I don't know about that. Well, he's taking an official visit to Miami and he's getting back to campus for the 3rd time in, what is it, like 2 months? So Miami's absolutely a player in that race, and that all of a sudden has become not that far-fetched of a theory. So that would certainly boost your stock quite a bit. The one thing that I'm thinking kind of might, and this is strictly talking from a rankings standpoint and kind of, the math that goes into the algorithms, is, Miami is trusting their own scouting a lot with some of these players who may not project to be, immediate day 1 starters. Now, I think, Miami, I definitely think Miami's going to end up landing plenty of 4-star and 5-star talent. And I think that they will have a shot at a top 10 class. But I think, kind of strictly from a mathematical standpoint, depending on the recruits that they end up taking, their number could be dragged down a little bit. But I think that there's a lot more value in a recruiting class than just what your final ranking ends up being. If you sign, let's say, I don't know, 15 3-star prospects, but you sign 4 out of the top 10 prospects in the country, all of a sudden that's a class that has a lot of value. And all of a sudden, I'm not looking at the 3-star recruits as much as I'm looking at, hey, you signed 4 top 10 prospects. So I do think Miami's probably going to have a chance to land a class not dissimilar to what they did last year. But I do think right now I'm probably going to stick with what I said about Miami kind of hanging around the 10-ish range, maybe 10 to 12.
And this is typical Mario Cristobal recruiting. He doesn't try to start fast. They want to build relationships. They want to make sure they're making the right choices. Remember, there is going to be NIL involved in most of these cases, and a lot of it in some of these cases. And the collectives and Life Wallet and these people don't have unlimited funds. So if a kid is going to come to Miami and be turned over to the NIL people to solidify that relationship and all and those things, you want to make sure that you're picking the right guys and that you've built relationships there. And so they've taken the time here in the last few months to do that. And now it's closing time, and it's going to be an exciting month of June. Now, today we start previewing some of the visits that are going to be coming up, and we take a look at a 3-star running back by the name of Kawan Lacey. Another one we have is on 2025 4-star tight end Brock Schott, and he had a lot of real positive things to say about Miami. This is a kid that's being recruited by Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. A guy to keep your eye on there. The Canes are doing relatively well, but Lacey will be on campus this weekend, and he tells us that he wants to hear what Miami can offer for his legacy on his official visit this weekend. So make sure you check out that story. Kind of interesting how Kawan Lacey is looking ahead towards his official visit. We also have a hoops recruiting update today on 2025 4-star point guard Caden Boozer. The Boozer twins are guys you're going to start hearing a lot about here as 2025 recruiting kicks into gear. And 2 elite prospects out of Miami Columbus. We'll be covering them a lot. So we have a story on Caden this morning. Over the weekend, Miami got a commitment from a guy with a familiar last name. He's an offensive guard from Georgia State, a transfer by the name of Louis Cristobal, Mario Cristobal's nephew, who has now signed up to play for Uncle Mario here, or we probably should say Tio Mario, for the last stage of his college football career. So that's going to be an exciting time for the Cristobal family to have Lewis on the Miami roster. But we are not forgetting about football in general as we, engage in all this baseball and recruiting coverage. And it's unusual for true freshmen to have an outsized impact on a program at Miami's level. But with the Canes coming off a 5-7 season and with a team loaded with young talent that had a great recruiting class last year, it's not so unreasonable to start projecting that some of these true freshmen are going to make major impacts this season. And I talked about this a little bit on the On3 Roundtable the other day, but I think there's going to be several of them that do. And obviously you start with Francis Magoa, who looks like he secured the starting spot at right tackle. You got Mark Fletcher at running back looking like he's going to make an immediate impact. And Ray Joseph at wide receiver. Matt Shodell, I also threw out the thought the other day that I wouldn't rule out even Samson Okinola from winning the left tackle spot. We watched Jalen Rivers struggle a little bit out there in the spring game, and it kind of got me wondering. I wonder if Samson can advance over these next few months to the point where they could feel comfortable maybe putting him at left tackle. Don't know what's going to happen with Zion Nelson coming off of injury, but it seemed like they might be better off sliding Jalen Rivers inside to guard as opposed to leaving him out at tackle. And that would open the door for Samson Okinola, in my mind, to play this fall. For freshmen in general, making an impact this year. Your thoughts on that and the prospects that Okinola might become the left tackle?
Thank you for asking me to comment on Steven's recruiting takes from a few minutes ago. I'll go ahead and do that.
Well, we gave you the first damn 15 minutes of the show. I mean, can Steven get a few words in?
So I wasn't allowed to breathe, Matt.
You couldn't breathe for the first 15 minutes while you went on and on, ranting and raving that they didn't feed you, that they didn't have pizza for you, that they didn't have milkshakes for you, when there's a place to buy food right across the street from the stadium. You just
can't dive if you can't dive. If you can't breathe, get a respirator. It'll help you tremendously, and then I'll have more time to talk because you can't talk.
Leave him alone. You're either cheap or you've been spending too much money in all those Gucci restaurants that you're always throwing around on the show.
Here, listen, the two of you live in La La Land. Here's the facts, okay? First of all, I agree. They will have a top 10 class because that's what Mario does. Like, that's a fact. He always has a top 10 class. He's going to have a top 10 class again. He's taking 3 stars right now, which is fine. But by definition, to me, the way that the networks do this, and a 3-star is essentially a guy who they're not saying can't be a great player. They're saying right now, physically, he's not a great player. So guys develop at different rates. If you're not an offensive tackle who's 6'6" and 305 pounds and can jump pretty high and has good movement, you're not going to be a 4 or 5 star. If you're like that, but you still might wind up being that in college. Anyway, but I'm not going to hammer on that. What I will hammer on is the fact this is the disconnect, okay, that you guys have, and that I don't understand. Maybe you can help me understand it, okay? You both agree that Miami's recruiting is going to be great. They're going to have great. Last year in June, they had, between June and July last year, they had 11 commitments. 11. That was like half the class. Okay, so that's when they really that's the bread and butter or the meat and potatoes, or in Gary's case, the chicken wings he scrounges off the floor at Hooters. If Zion Nelson is able to come back, and maybe he will be, then you don't need Samson. Samson played at a program in I think it was Brockton, maybe Massachusetts, or Braintree, somewhere out there. They didn't play very good opponents. If you watch his film, he's playing against 5'11", 6'0" defensive linemen that are not big, and just throws them around. And you watch him in the spring, and he's still really got a lot of work to do. He looks better than Mamagoa, who's going to be an amazing tackle. Like when you look at Samson Okinola, the leanness of him and just the brute strength and the room to grow, Mamagoa is already pretty filled out. Okinola, believe it or not, has a lot of room on his frame to still grow, which is insane. He's going to be absolutely amazing. But sometimes you rush this guy into action and it screws him up. Like he needs to put some weight on, believe it or not, in the strength room. You look at him, he's just got so much upside in terms of what he can gain in a real legitimate strength room versus the program he was in, which was not a top program like Mamagoa was in. So I redshirt him. I don't want him to play. I don't think they need him to play, because if you do get a little bit out of Zion, you do have a guy in Jalen Rivers who can play tackle suitably, and then you got some guys who just have to be ready to step up for depth. Like I understand the need to rush and win right now. That's not for me. I want Samson Okinola to be an all ACC tackle
5 games again this year.
Next year, not to have a setback.
What happened to him?
Not to have a setback this year, because when you're in game weeks and you're preparing as a second teamer, you're not in that redshirt program where you're just working out and have a whole different regimen than guys that are playing. I want Samson in that program. I'm sorry.
Listen, he will not be in the starting lineup at the beginning of the season if he's not ready to be. If he's not the best left tackle on the roster, you won't see him out there. But if he is the best left tackle on the roster, he has got to be on the field. They are trying to win games and have to win games. They cannot go 5-7 or 6-6.
You still don't understand. Stop playing to win 8 games this year instead of 7 and start playing to win 10, 11, and 12 games next year and the year after. I don't understand this rush to be average right now instead of bad. Like, I want championship teams. Samson Okinola needs to pad his frame. He will be an All-American left tackle if they allow him to do that. If they rush him onto the field, it will set back his development. I just feel that way. I'm sorry.
How does it keep him from getting bigger and stronger if he's playing this year?
Because when you're in season as a football player versus as a red shirt, you have Sundays walkthroughs, you have Mondays off, Tuesday is practice, Wednesday's practice, Thursday's a walkthrough, Friday's off. If you're red shirting, you're in the weight room gaining weight, you're working out every day, and you're still in practice, right? Those other days you're still in practice learning techniques and working with the coaches. But it's those weight room days he so desperately needs that the guys during the season that play don't do, because you can't wear your body down in games and in the weight room at the same time. Like, you can't do that.
You sign a 5-star stud like this kid, the minute he's ready to be on the field, you're putting him out there.
They might. I would not love to see him out there, but they might. I think Maui Goa, I don't have a problem with Maui Goa because he's already physically at his peak. He's played in an IMG program. He's been coached essentially at a college level already last year. He's ready mentally. He's ready physically. But a guy like Samson, you look at him, you say, wow, he could pack on 20 more pounds of muscle, no problem, and be a dominant offensive tackle next year. He could be average this year, maybe a little above average. Maybe he's the best they got. But I want him to be that dominant guy next year, and I think it would set him back if he plays this year. That's all I'm trying to say. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people out there think I'm nuts. Most people do think I'm nuts. But that's how I view things. I view things for the future, not for a team I think is going to be mediocre to a little above mediocre this year.
I'm looking at Stephen Wagner. He looks like he thinks you're nuts. Coach Stephen, if Samson Okinola is ready to go on the field in September of this year, whether it's week 1, week 3, week 4, whatever, do you put him in the starting lineup, or do you say, hey, I don't want to play you this year. I want to save you for down the road. You just go spend your time over in the weight room with Coach Feld, and just worry about getting bigger and stronger for next year and the year after. We've got this year.
I am playing him immediately the second that he's ready to go, because this isn't the NFL. You don't get a better draft pick if you suck this year. If that was the case, then UMass would be competing for a national championship.
Will you make sure that Steven gets a raise?
If you were getting draft picks, if you were getting some sort of advantage for being bad at football, UMass and Vanderbilt would be running the show right now. But they're not, because in college football, the winners or the rich get richer. This is why Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State have dominated recruiting for as long as they have, because
they have their freshmen sit their freshman year, Steven. I hate to tell you, the schools you just said, they don't rush their freshman offensive tackles onto the field.
But the second that a freshman is good enough to get on the field, they put them out there that freely.
Rarely. When they have a hole in their lineup and a guy who's physically developed like Maui Goa, yes. If they have Samson right now at Alabama, he's sitting out the year and getting stronger in the weight room. Like, that's just a fact.
If he's ready to go, they are playing every freshman that is ready to go. That's what Nick Saban does.
And what I'm trying to tell you,
as a true freshman,
you listen to me.
You're better than that guy. You get to play.
You literally just proved my point. I literally said Samson is not ready to go because he played in a program that didn't prepare him. And he's got 30 pounds of muscle he needs to gain. I literally said that. You're proving my point.
So in September, they will not put him out there.
They will if he's the best player. You're wrong, Gary. You're wrong.
Tackle in the spring game.
You're wrong. They will put him out. They will put him out if he's not ready, if they think he's the best they got. And that's the truth. And that's not right.
If he's the best they got, they should put him out there.
No.
If you watched your quarterback last year, you would prefer not to lose him this year.
Wow.
You need to make sure you have your best left tackle on the field. we'll leave it at that. All right, that's going to do it for this morning for Good Morning CaneSport. Thank you so much for starting out your day with us as usual. If you like this show, even somewhat like Matt Shodell, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube and growing our audience. And more than anything, please, if you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please jump on board our website. Please join our community. We promise you will have a good time, and hopefully you will enjoy our coverage every day. And listen, your subscriptions allow us to do what we do for you guys every day to try to help you enhance your fan experience. Sometimes I admit that the way Matt goes on and on and on about some of these subjects, that seems like a little bit shaky ground, no argument, but our initiative is to try to make your fan experience as good as it can be. And we do our best every day at CaneSport.com. So for Stephen Wagner, Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time, everybody.